And welcome back to part 4 of our underrated JDM cars series. And today I have 5 more underrated JDM cars for you guys. You probably guessed that just by looking at the title of this video. So if you haven't seen the first 3 parts of this series, I'm going to link the playlist up there in the top right of your screen. Be sure to check it out after this video. And as always, be sure to like, share, subscribe. And if you have an underrated JDM car that's not in this video, put it down in the comments below. But you already know what it is, just 5 underrated JDM cars. Not going to waste any more of your time, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So for the first car on this list, we're going to be talking about the 3rd generation of the Mitsubishi Eclipse. And now you might be wondering why I'm putting this cheap Ferrari 348 clone on this list. So let me try to explain. This generation of the Eclipse was the first generation where they switched from all-wheel drive to front-wheel drive. Doesn't sound that great. And this car came in 2 engine configurations. Neither of them came with a turbo. It came with a 3-liter V6 or a 2.4-liter 4-cylinder motor, depending on which model you got. But for this video, I'm mainly just going to be talking about the V6 model. Also in this generation of the Eclipse, they changed up the suspension a little bit. They made it softer for a more comfortable ride. So with all this out of the way, why is this car even on the list to begin with? So there's 3 main reasons that this car is still on this list. Number 1, this car came in a manual transmission, makes it very fun to drive. Secondly, if you add coilovers to the suspension, it beefs it up a lot, and it can handle with the best of them. It'll be up there with Civic Type Rs and the Honda Integras. Of course, this was an early 2000s car, so it's going to handle with the sports cars right around that time period. And even though the V6 model from factory came with a lackluster 210 horsepower, this car has a very good compression ratio of 10:1, and so slapping a turbo on it can easily give you 300 to 350 wheel horsepower in this car, which makes it an absolute canyon carver. It'll be a king on any back road you take it on. And you may be thinking to yourself, why is this an underrated JDM car if I have to dump 5 grand into it to make it a decent sports car? The thing is, the car in the current market is absolutely slept on with its pricing. You can find even the nicest models of this generation of Eclipse for under $5,000. So let's say you go out and find a decent manual transmission V6 model for $3,000. You add a turbo, you add some coilovers, you're all in at about 8 grand for a 350 horsepower front wheel drive Canyon King. And the outside looks of this car aren't that bad either. And now for the second car on this list, it is a Honda, but bear with me, it's actually a really cool Honda. It is the 6th generation Honda Accord, but the Type R version, which was produced from 1997 until 2002. Now this car came with a 2.2-liter dual overhead cam 4-cylinder motor, commonly referred to as the H22 Red Top. This engine did come with VTEC and made 217 horsepower. In the late 90s, that was actually really good. This engine is extremely tunable. So in this front-wheel drive car, you get a super nice and durable engine that can be built up a lot. It's dual overhead cam, it's got a lot of space for a turbo, you can boost it pretty easily and have a lot of fun with this car. And if we dive into the interior of the Accord Type R, you get Recaro seats and a Momo leather steering wheel, and that's all stock from factory. It's really a shock that they made less than 2,000 of these in the span that the Accord Type R was made. And the fact that you can pick up this awesome little tuner car for 5 to 10 grand, which is a great car for both beginner drivers and experienced veterans, it's really just a great deal. It's super slept on in the market, and I wish more people would import these into the United States and we could see more of it. Now for the 3rd car on this list, it is something a little bit different. It is a little K car from Japan, and if you've seen Initial D, you already know what car I'm about to be talking about. It is a Suzuki Cappuccino, which came with a turbocharged inline 3-cylinder 657cc motor. And while K cars were originally designed to bypass the Japanese tax regulations on big cars and big engines, this car is actually something that is very sporty and very fun to drive. It comes from factory with a retractable roll cage. Yes, retractable because this car is a target top and double wishbone suspension. And now while this car only makes 63 horsepower, you may be thinking, well, that's not a lot. How could this car even be any fun? It makes less than the Miata. but this car only weighs 1,500 pounds. It is so much fun to drive on back roads, drive in the mountains, drive in the canyons. This is just a car that you take out on the weekends and you just absolutely tear up the road. And this car is also rear-wheel drive, which makes it a very viable drift car, whether you're in the canyons or actually on a drift track. And it's really quirky looking too. It kind of looks like a frog. I think they're really cool, but that's just Japanese K-car design. And this car is absolutely amazing. It's on par with a Miata or an S2000 in the canyons. And now this next car on this list was actually produced by Dodge in the first 2 generations of this car. But in the 3rd generation from 1997 to the year 2000, Mitsubishi decided to scrap the Dodge model and actually brought this car to the United States. It is the Mitsubishi GTO, or in the United States, it is referred to as the Mitsubishi 3000 GT. You could get this car in either a dual overcam V6, which was naturally aspirated, or you could opt for the twin turbo model. And while the NA V6 in the US only made 220 horsepower, the twin turbo model actually made 320 horsepower. Now that is C5 Corvette numbers before the C5 even came out. And it really hurts to see this car slept on in the modern market, because originally this car was supposed to compete with the Toyota Supra and the Mazda RX-7 at the time, and it did that and more. It was actually a better car in terms of handling, in terms of speed, maybe not quite buildability of motor, but it was really up there. This is a really fantastic car that Mitsubishi brought out in the late 90s. So in the late 90s, this car did not get any praise at all. Even today, this car still goes highly unnoticed by most of car culture. Most of car guys don't even know that this car even exists. It's all about the Supra, the RX-7, and the R34, but everybody always forgets about the 3000 GT. Now, popularity for this car has picked up a little bit in recent years, but prices are still very manageable, around the $10,000 to $15,000 mark. Even for the twin turbo models, you can find some of them around the $15,000 mark. And this is just really a steal in the current market, and I think that this car will only continue to gain value as time goes on and more people realize what a mistake they made by not buying this car to begin with. And now the 5th and final car on this list isn't necessarily a super sporty car or something that you will take out and tear up the track with, but it's just as cool in the regard that it is a early 90s Japanese luxury car. This car was made in 1991, and it was meant to compete with cars like the Mazda Yunus Cosmo and the Lexus SC300, which I have put in part 3 and part 2 of this video series. Once again, shameless plug, go and check out the playlist after this entry. And although this car only made 200 horsepower and was front-wheel drive, it had some of the best technology that any luxury car at the time had to offer. I mean, this car was even compared to Mercedes-Benz and BMWs at the time. It came with heated seats, heated mirrors, speed-sensitive steering. It came with a hands-free telephone. It even had electric soft closed doors in the coupe models. That is something you see on modern Maybachs and Rolls Royces. This car was absolutely beautiful on the inside. This was the peak of luxury in 1991, and this is something that all the ballers in Japan would ride in the back seat of. And even though this car was not a performance or a track monster, I still think that early 1990s Japanese luxury cars are super cool. And even though they're a little quirky, especially on the exteriors, I think that they are super neat and super underrated in today's market, because you can pick a lot of these luxury cars up, like this Acura Legend for example, for around $10,000 to $15,000. If that, you know, that's for like a super nice one. And so they really are a killer deal, and you get all kinds of cool stuff on the inside, and you will feel like an old school Yakuza boss as you ride around in luxury. And there y'all go. I now am up to 20 underrated JDM cars that I have put into videos. And so there is a huge array of different styles of cars, different types of brands, all different kinds of quirky and awesome Japanese cars that are super slept on in the market today, that should be picked up and should be priced a lot higher, to be honest. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave the comment down below. What do you think I left out of this video that should have been in it? But for now, this is Scion Life signing out.